Let's talk about lockdowns and curfews with psychiatrist Tanveer Ahmed. Good to see you again, Tanveer. Tell me, have they gone too hard in Victoria? Is this going to cause more medical, mental health, social problems than it fixes?
Well, it almost certainly will. In terms of the balance, it's hard to tell. I mean, realistically, in terms of the numbers Victoria having, the idea that they're going to have a 6-week lockdown to really suppress the virus isn't really going to be enough. And I'm not sure the public can have the stomach for the actual figures, which would be closer to 10, 11 weeks. I don't think they can possibly do that. Already I'm hearing, just I guess through the grapevine, people losing business. You're hearing all these anecdotal stories that they can't run their business anymore, all these economic impacts. So I don't doubt that it'll be there. That's not to say it's not a very serious situation. I think what's interesting here, Chris, is when we've had past studies about this stuff, like SARS, etc., we've actually got, say, psychological impact of those. They haven't been as long and they haven't been repeated. So we're actually in new territory where, if we think of Australia, we were pretty compliant April, right? And I think overall, even though we're seen as a bit of a larrikin country, we did comply for the most part. But this is going to test the limits of that, Chris.
Friends in Melbourne have told me the same. We all know that sort of esprit de corps we had with the first lockdown. This is not good, but we're all in it together. They say there's not much of that in Melbourne this time. There's more frustration and anger that they're having to do this again, and uncertainty. What do you say? What does the psychiatry tell us about the way people react to these rules, to obeying a curfew? Do you accept that authority, or does it grate with people and cause angst?
Well, it's actually exactly what I've written about this week in The Spectator. And I'm looking at what we know about obedience and political authority. And one of the most famous experiments, Chris, is this one called the Milgram experiment in the 70s, as where people in white coats were sending electric shocks into people. They had subjects doing it, and people in white coats were overseeing it. And what they found was, people willing to do extraordinary things, like potentially put people into life-threatening situations because there were people in white coats saying it was okay. But some of the interesting things they found, Chris, early on, direct, kind of a commanding sort of nature was acceptable. But the longer the experiment went on, people weren't willing to accept it, which is very interesting because I think arguably Daniel Andrews has this sort of, we've all heard the derisive label, Dictator Dan.
Yeah, he's been lecturing people, yeah.
He's got a very sort of commanding, go do this or you're all going to die. And he has lost a bit of authority with all the quarantine, etc. So I'll be very interested to how long he can hold up that kind of style. He does very little. I think he's trying a bit harder to explain some of it. But I think this will really test the patience of Melburnians. And we're effectively in a psychological experiment, exactly around political authority, obedience. Most people don't care about politics in countries like Australia. We only just care around elections. But we're being forced to really think about a kind of moral authority of a political leader over a long period of time.
It's not the politics that matters to people, it's their lives and their livelihoods. So just finally, tell us any advice you give for people, families, under stress, economic pain, uncertainty, isolated during this period. What's the best thing they can do to just keep themselves on top of things?
Look, I think doing those sort of simple things, setting up new routines, having daily exercise, even having rituals like, wearing different outfits in terms of trying to work, and talk. The reality is we have social media, so stay connected. Yep. It is, I think, in general, we can have an aggressive type of friendship between us, and that can potentially get us through. But at the same time, also there's a bit of, I think, dissent is necessary. Already this morning I heard, I think it was the CEO of Bunnings or Wesfarmers, talking about that they may kind of rejig some of these lockdowns as they get a bit more information. So I think Victorians have every right to kind of challenge it because I think it can be rejigged. I mean, remember with Daniel Andrews some of his rules where, partners couldn't even meet.
Yes.
So he has got a history of overstepping. So I don't think they should accept it without question either.
It's good to talk to you again. Good to have a human being on the desk here again. See you next time. Thanks, Tanveer. Tanveer Ahmed there with some good advice. We'll keep on these issues too as Melburnians deal with this situation.